Good morning, and thanks, Janet, for the lovely introduction. So yes, I'm here to kick us off to begin our discussion of what the latest energy price cap means for low-income families. So the first 2 points I am very sure are no surprise to you if you've been paying attention in the media over the past couple of weeks. It's been announced that the energy price cap is expected to fall from 2,074 pounds as set in July of this year to 1,923 pounds from October. In addition to that, we've also heard that the prepayment meter charge has been scrapped, saving households about 20 pounds a year on average. Now, overall, these are all welcome changes for many low-income households and households across the UK ahead of what could be a very challenging winter. But during this time, the time that I have with you this morning, I want us to clarify what exactly all of this might actually mean for a household. Oftentimes we'll hear narratives, and I would say a bit misleading and unclear narratives of what actually these two changes would mean. And oftentimes the media would suggest that these changes in this fall and the price cap would mean that households will be saving a significant amount more ahead of what could be a challenging winter. But during the time here that I have with you, I want to paint a different picture. I want to bring in new parts of the story to highlight that although the reduced price cap is a very good improvement, households will still face quite high charges when it comes to energy. And many households, because of the financial vulnerable place that they're in, might not actually be able to meet their energy costs. So the last 2 points begin to highlight these two, highlight a different part of this picture. And then for the duration of what I'll be talking about, I'll be bringing in other parts of this as well. So overall, if we're looking back to October 2021, households will still face a 50% increase in their energy bills, paying about £881 more in bills. We've also heard recently that 1.9 million households with children under 5 will still face force fitting of prepayment meters despite the ban on force fitting for vulnerable groups. As I mentioned, I'm hoping that in the bit of time that I have with you today, I'm hoping to broaden this discussion and highlight the larger picture of household vulnerability and show that in addition to a relatively high energy price cap, energy inefficient households, the impact of welfare reforms, as well as unclaimed benefits, so not taking up the benefits that you're eligible for, means that households will continue to struggle to meet energy costs and will still need additional support. Next slide, please. So the first part of the picture that I'd hope to bring in is the picture on energy inefficient homes. So we've found through analysis that my lovely colleague Isabel has done that larger families living in older properties could see annual bills reaching £6,356 this year. Just for the record, given the energy price cap report that we've seen, this is about £4,433 more than the energy price cap or the annual amount of an energy bill expected for a household. Now, you'll see on this chart a very pretty graph that I'll break down really quickly for you. So this shows the estimated energy costs by EPC rating and household size from October 2023. Basically, if you look, each of the different colors of the bar represent different household sizes. So the blue bar represents a 1-bedroom property, about 1 to 2 people living in that household, whereas the gray bar, the one on the far right-hand side, represents a larger property or 5-bedroom home housing about 4 to 5 people. And the different clusters of bars would highlight the different EPC ratings, where A, B, C properties are properties that are highly efficient, whereas properties D and above, so D, E, F, and G, are the highly inefficient properties. All this is to say that on average, households that are larger, living in older homes, and also larger amounts of people within a household will expect to see larger energy costs. And will probably not be seeing much of a reduction in their energy prices, even despite the fall in the energy price cap. Next slide, please. Now, you might be questioning then, this is a bit abstract. What does that actually look like, for instance, for a low-income household? Based on some analysis that I've done for the families that we have in our low-income family tracker, we found that roughly 46% of households within LIFT with an up-to-date EPC certificate are living in EPC bands D+, so highly inefficient homes. And just as a preliminary stat, if you look within these numbers, you'll find that this is about 60% of owner-occupiers that have up-to-date EPC certificates, as well as slightly less for those living in the private rental sector. So huge swaths of low-income households are about 1 in 2 of them are living in properties that are highly inefficient, meaning that they'll be paying a lot more on average per year just to keep the heating on. Now, I don't want all of this presentation just to be about doom and gloom. In fact, at Policy and Practice, we're all about empowering people and using data to do so. And as you'll see on the screen, there are 2 pictures from our low income family tracker that I've mentioned a bit earlier that highlight there's actually a way forward here. So each on the left-hand side, so the map there shows different dots that represent households. And I've narrowed the subset of households there to specifically look at the properties that were in D and above EPC ratings. So you can compile a list of the households living in inefficient homes and use that, for instance, for targeted payments and payouts. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll also see a cost of living modeling screen where we've pulled out about 4 or 5 target groups that councils can use to target payments to those who are likely to feel the pinch of rising energy costs. Next slide, please. So in addition to energy efficiency of properties, another element of the story that I want to bring into this about energy costs is welfare reform. Generally speaking, households hit by welfare reforms are likely to struggle with energy costs. Now, from our ongoing analysis, I want to present about 4 headline figures to share with you to kind of contextualize that main statement. So the first is 40% of households claiming universal credit and council tax support have deductions from the universal credit award. Most universal credit households with deductions often lose about 20 to 30% of their standard allowance. Now, the standard allowance is there to help households meet their basic costs for things like food, water, fuel. And when households don't receive that full amount, and already even at the full amount, benefit levels are so low that they'd already be struggling, much less than taking away an extra 20 or 30%, oftentimes means that households are not able to afford essential costs for things like heating. Now, I wanted to add in another layer to this, if it couldn't get any worse, when we're thinking about the benefit cap. Ben-capped families cannot afford to rent anywhere in the UK. Any of the broad rental market areas within the UK is unaffordable for a household that is benefit capped without having to dip into their standard allowance. And this was done in analysis that we've run over the past couple of years, which you can find on our Policy and Practice website. Now, to complement this sad picture already, when we bring in the debt piece as well, 28% of households have arrears, whether rent arrears, council tax arrears, housing benefit overpayments. So altogether, households are already struggling within the benefit system, especially when impacted by or hit by welfare reforms. They're already struggling to make ends meet and will likely need additional support to meet any of their basic costs, let alone the rising energy costs, especially for inefficient homes. And this comes on top of the removal of the £400 energy rebate that was in place from last year. Next slide. Now, this is a new slide. This is hot off the press, so many of you might not have heard this or might have just heard this alongside sipping your coffee this morning. But we've received an email from the DWP comms team to share this with all of you. This is an announcement today that they've given about the 2023 and 2024 cost of living payments. And we think it would be right to share this with you, and so that you can spread the word, and also you'd be aware of what's to come from the 31st of October to the 19th of November. So today's announcement gave details about the second cost of living payment that was announced earlier this year in April during the spring statement. So the announcement today is that millions are to receive the second £300 cost of living payment. This is to be paid automatically between the 31st of October and the 19th of November. Who's getting this? So if you have claimed one of the qualifying benefits that I've listed out here, so for instance, universal credit and pension credit are the 2 big ones. If you've claimed these benefits between the relevant window or the time period of the 18th of August to September the 17th of September, you should be receiving this payment automatically. Eligible pensioner households will also get an extra £300 later this year on top of their winter fuel payments. Just as a side note, actually, as we have been doing the as we've been participating in the pension credit take-up campaign across London, just a plug for any of the pensioners, if you're a pensioner on this, please look into whether or not you'd be eligible for pension credit, because due to the backdating rules, you might actually still be able to get a £300 cost of living payment. So if you haven't, please check out our Better Off calculator, see if you're eligible and apply, because you might actually get an additional bout of money that can help make the difference between whether or not you can afford heating this winter. So all of this is really welcome news, and we're really excited to be sharing all of this with you hot off the press. But this also comes with, on the flip side of the coin, that there hasn't been any additional support for next year announced. So households are there's a bit of uncertainty in the air about what would happen going forward for households who are still trying to figure out how to make their ends meet. Next slide. Now, the last bit of this puzzle that I think is really important for us to think about is this picture around unclaimed benefits. So as many of you have probably heard us speaking about our latest publication called the Missing Out, 19 billion pounds of support goes unclaimed each year. We find that 466 million pounds in energy vouchers and warm homes discount goes unclaimed each year. This is a huge pot of money that could be given and you could claim to help with your energy costs that just gets left on the table every single year. Next slide, please. And this is on top of national benefits that are being unclaimed. So for instance, universal credit is the largest pot of national support that is unclaimed each year, where 7.6 billion pounds of universal credit is unclaimed by 1.3 million households. Council tax support is the most underclaimed benefit within England in local support, with 2.7 million households missing out on 2.9 billion pounds of council tax support. Now, I think it's quite important for us to think about, for instance, what that actually means. So oftentimes, at least for me, I think billions and millions seems really abstract. So if you're sitting here, if you're sat here and you're from a council and you're interested in figuring out what that actually means in your region, in your place and community, do let us know, give us a shout at Policy and Practice, and we'll be happy to chat with you about the level of unclaimed benefits in your area. And if we go to the next slide, if you're still kind of questioning, what does that actually mean for me as an individual household, or what might that mean for some of my customers that I'm serving? We've had some ongoing analysis with existing clients to make this abstract, huge pot of money actually bring it down to the individual size. And we found that households on average have been missing out on about 300 to 400 pounds a month, because they're not taking up all that they're eligible for. And about 7% of households are missing out on over £1,000 per month. Just to contextualize these stats, on average, households are paying back about 200 to 300 pounds to debtors per month. In essence, if households are taking up all the benefits that they're eligible for, it would make the difference between not only just meeting one's priority debts, but then having enough money to meet their energy bill every month. This is huge amount of support that households are not taking up. And at Policy and Practice, we're really dedicated to trying to encourage people to figure out what you're eligible for, take that up, and provide empowering solutions to councils and companies alike to encourage their customers to figure out what they're eligible for and claim. Next slide. So overall, and before I hand off this portion of the presentation to Sharon, more needs to be done to help vulnerable households to meet their energy costs. On this slide, I've listed out about 3 points of three promising points of what we're currently seeing to help households address some of the vulnerabilities that I've talked about earlier in this presentation. So the first specifically takes a stance against energy inefficient homes. There's been the announcement of a £1 billion Great British Insulation Scheme to save households with about £400 on energy bills by helping them to insulate their homes. As my colleague Isabel says, and I'd be remiss if I didn't remind everyone about this, improving the energy efficiency of homes is the best way to improve the long-term picture around high energy costs. Now, the second part that is quite a big deal for us here at Policy and Practice is using data to proactively target support to vulnerable households. And we've worked with several clients and councils that are using data, for instance, the Low Income Family Tracker platform, to proactively target support to households that are likely to feel the pinch of higher energy costs due to having negative budgets or due to living in energy inefficient homes. And lastly, and hopefully to provide a good foundation for Sharon in just a moment's time, the picture around social tariffs. So an EDF Energy survey, actually, hopefully I'm quoting this correctly, Sharon, but do correct me if I'm wrong, but over 3/4 or 77% of the British public support the introduction of a social tariff for vulnerable energy customers. And for instance, EDF Energy is one of the groups who are working alongside Policy and Practice to encourage the take up of social tariffs to help meet higher energy costs. And they're using the Better Off calculator to do so. So with that, I will hand it over to Sharon, who will speak a bit more about some of the great work that she's doing over at EDF to help support low-income households with higher energy costs. But first, I'll actually toss it over to Janet, who will lead us in a poll.